Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. This is Nate Gustafson sharing from Denver, Colorado, and I know I've got a few gentlemen who are live and in person with me today online, and so appreciate you guys hopping on board for this presentation. You are joining us for the Validation Breakthrough presentation, a live webinar to help you care, connect, and companion along the journey with folks who are struggling with the awful disease of Alzheimer's disease. And as we get into this presentation today, I'll be sharing quite a bit from this book called The Validation Breakthrough. I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but I'd highly recommend anyone that is interested in this topic about how to gain confidence to connect with and to care for and to walk along the journey with someone going through Alzheimer's disease. The book, The Validation Breakthrough, which I'll be referring to today, is a wonderful resource for any of you to experience. So thank you again for everybody that's joining us live. If you are catching this recording later, I appreciate you so much. If you don't mind, whenever you catch this presentation, would you just share it? Would you share it with your colleagues? Would you share it with family members, friends, whether that's on your Facebook feed, whether that's through word of mouth, whether that's through forwarding the Hope Connection e-newsletter that you might be receiving that lets you know about these live webinars. Please share it. My goal in 2019 is to really help folks to care, connect, and companion well, whether it's dealing with folks who are struggling with Alzheimer's disease, whether it's caring for a loved one in your own family that's struggling with some illness or ailment, whether that's just making a difference with your volunteer hours or your professional life. We want to encourage you to get out there and make a difference this year in 2019. So with that being said, welcome again to this presentation on the Validation Breakthrough, where we want to help you gain confidence to care, connect, and companion those who are facing the real struggle of Alzheimer's disease. So to start off with, I just want to share a little bit about what Alzheimer's disease is and what it isn't to help us understand the difference between Alzheimer's and other dementias. So Alzheimer's disease is named after a German physician who in the early 20th century discovered that there's a very common cognitive disorder, and it's often prevalent as folks grow older, and it's been classified as one of a number of different dementia diseases. So you might think that dementia and Alzheimer's are interchangeable, whereas Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, which is a term for general memory loss, a decline that impacts a person's ability to function. And so there are other dementias. Sometimes you might hear of someone have a frontal temporal lobe of their brain. Right behind your forehead here is your frontal temporal part of your brain. That's an area of your brain that controls your ability to control your emotions, to control your impulses. So if you're having a cognitive brain disease in that part of your brain, it will act a lot differently than the Alzheimer's function, which is deeper embedded in a person's brain. There's also Lewy body dementia, which is often a very close cousin to Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's that may lead towards a dementia is oftentimes known as Lewy body dementia. There in Alzheimer's lingo, there's also known as early onset Alzheimer's for folks who are younger than 65, who may even as early as in their late 40s or mid 40s come up with severe cognitive disability, losing a lot of memory, losing the ability to function through everyday life. There's also vascular dementia, which might be caused due to a stroke or an anoxic brain injury where the brain did not receive oxygen during someone who maybe suffered some sort of traumatic brain injury. There's also alcohol-induced dementia. So all of these various diseases, disorders are not normal. This is not normal aging. We may joke in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that we are coming down with Alzheimer's because we forget where we put our keys, or we forgot to go pick up a gallon of milk at the store. That's just normal for many of us. That's normal for me on a weekly, almost a daily basis. But Alzheimer's disease refers to a brain disease that truly, in order to fully be diagnosed with true Alzheimer's, we can't really get to that until someone passes on and they have an autopsy of their brain. So the way we diagnose Alzheimer's before someone dies and has a brain autopsy is we rule out a whole bunch of other possible causes for their disease. So a neurologist or a physician can rule out all sorts of other brain diseases and get to the point where they finally come up with the realization that this is Alzheimer's disease. And especially today, we're focusing on Alzheimer's disease as it presents in an older person, someone older than 65. And it's a result of what you might read in the literature of plaques and tangles that cause literal holes in the electrical synapses and the electrical connections that are going through your brain, so that one part of the brain isn't talking to another part of the brain, which is losing touch with memories, and to the point where only the memories that were stored deep, deep inside the warehouses of our brains last as we age through this Alzheimer's progression. So that's what Alzheimer's is. It's the most common dementia. So dementia being a general term for memory loss. There are lots of other dementias out there that are not Alzheimer's disease, and Alzheimer's disease is not normal aging. So let's look at some facts and figures with Alzheimer's. Just in the state where I live, where many of you who might be listening to this resource, listening to this training reside, by the year 2020, so in less than a year, 76,000 persons in Colorado will be diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's or Alzheimer's disease in later ages, so that after 65 and older with Alzheimer's. Just to put that in perspective, Mile High Stadium here in Denver, Colorado, where the Broncos play, many of your professional sports stadiums where the NFL teams play, all have approximately 75 to 80,000 seats in them. So just in 2020, in our state alone, we could sell out Mile High Stadium with the people in Colorado living with Alzheimer's disease. But due to the aging population, due to the rise in the people affected by Alzheimer's disease, it's predicted that by 2025, 91,000 people in Colorado will be having to deal with this disease, which, to put that in perspective, some college football stadiums like the Big House in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Penn State Stadium, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, all of those stadiums house over 100,000 people. So not very long down the road here, we will be filling stadiums upon stadiums of people who are dealing with Alzheimer's disease. Currently, nationally, as well as in Colorado, Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death. Heart disease, lung disease, things like stroke are all declining in terms of the mortality rate for individuals in our culture and our society, but unfortunately Alzheimer's deaths are on the rise. It's predicted and estimated that 200,000 people nationally struggle with what I mentioned earlier, which is early onset Alzheimer's, who are younger than the age of 65. 1 in 3 seniors eventually die with Alzheimer's as a contributing factor. So they may die of a heart attack at age 85, but they may also have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And if you think about it, there are millions and millions and millions of people affected by this on an everyday basis. It's estimated that there are 16 million unpaid caregivers taking care of someone who is dealing with and struggling with this terrible disease. That could be a spouse, or it could be a friend, it could be a next-door neighbor. It could be a grandchild caring for their grandparent. So you can imagine that anyone who faces or intersects their life with someone who has this struggle of Alzheimer's may feel overwhelmed, may feel very uncertain about how to help, feel very unprepared. I know that I didn't have anybody directly in my family who had Alzheimer's disease, at least a diagnosed case of Alzheimer's disease. But 13 years ago, getting involved in hospice care, I came face to face with the reality that there are many, many, many of our dear saints living at home with family members caring for them, living in assisted living or senior living communities who are facing this very real struggle of Alzheimer's disease. And I know that when I would go to try to interact with them, as I would go to try to communicate with them, I realized very quickly that my language was not connecting to their language, and we were just totally missing the boat. We could not connect. And I felt very unprepared. I didn't learn any of this in seminary to become a hospice chaplain. The little bit of training I got started to get started in hospice care didn't prepare me for these emotions of feeling so overwhelmed, so uncertain. I wanted to help so badly, but I didn't know how to help or what to do or how to connect with these people. And so I can really relate with the families that are in the midst of a terrible struggle. Every day they're having communication battles. Every day they're watching their loved one go through changes of physical function, and they're dealing with very complex dynamics. Alzheimer's, the loss of memory, the impact of how this disease touches each and every sector of our brain. It creates very complex social, emotional, and spiritual dynamics. And truly we're going to see this more and more and more with the result of what sociologists and those that predict the changes in society, they talk about a silver tsunami that's about to hit, especially the Western world, as the baby boomers continue to age, as the greatest generation folks and the folks that are in their 80s and 90s today have been able to live much longer. And so the stress and the strain of all this is very, very real. I want to share with you all a video as we take a deep dive today into the validation breakthrough techniques. This is a technique developed by Naomi Fail and her work in working with folks dealing with Alzheimer's. And so I'm going to enlarge this, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this as Naomi Fail works with a woman named Gladys Wilson.
Very old and deteriorated, and no one enters their world, and they're just sitting there. They will withdraw inward more and more, and their desperate need for connection is all now inside. And if a person is all alone, even if they're very, very deteriorated, there's longing for this kind of closeness. Mrs. Wilson? Hello? You want me to sit? Can you see me good? Gladys Wilson is a wonderful example of a person who was in the phase of repetitive motion. When people use movement, repetitive movement, because they don't have any more speech or very little speech, but they have human needs that need to be expressed. The breakthrough doesn't happen every time. person will not always open their eyes and look at you. But if you keep trying, and you keep centering yourself, and really look at that person, and really mirror their movement, maybe not this time, but the next time you come, you'll have communication. You'll say, Jesus.
That is the validation breakthrough technique which Naomi Fail has implemented and has brought to bear in the world of caring for these folks. So I'm going to get back to our slideshow here. So what you saw there was Naomi Fail using very simple techniques to help break through the fog and the difficulty of someone with dementia, with this specific type of dementia, Alzheimer's disease. And she makes it very clear that this is not a formula approach. This is not every time you work with someone who is like this, will you be this successful? There are lots of wins, there are lots of losses, there are lots of moments still of frustration as you work with these folks, but one time when you're able to connect, to be able to get through to a person, to let this precious person know that they are loved, that they are cared for, that they are safe in this moment with you, it's worth all the effort to learn these techniques, to learn ways to communicate and learn to connect with these people. So truly, truly, without validation, we see so many people who are just tossed away in without any regard into senior living communities. They're left all alone. Their family is burned out, frustrated, just feeling like they're unable to handle any more of this because they just feel so overwhelmed and so incapacitated themselves to know what to do, to care, to connect, to companion with their loved one. And so validation provides a better way. Without validation, we can feel like we just don't have any confidence. We can feel like our stress level as a caregiver, whether it's your profession, whether it's a family member, can feel like your stress level is just going through the roof. In the care communities and the professional world, there's just such a high turnover rate. And it's been proven that by giving staff members in memory care units, long-term care facilities, some sort of training, whether it's this training through validation, whether it's other training that is out there, a little bit of training, a little bit of help to be able to connect to these people goes such a long way. It reduces the stress, it reduces the feeling of not being able to make a difference. And again, who wants to feel like everything that you do is just futile? Who wants to feel like you're just empty? You're coming up empty every time you try to care and communicate and connect with these people. And Naomi Fail, in her research, has proposed that as a person progresses through Alzheimer's, they are much more likely to withdraw to the point of complete vegetation if they do not have people in their lives consistently validating them, consistently being present with them, consistently helping them to unlock their memories, unlock their speech. But with validation, the goal for us that are really involved and highly caring for these people, the goal is to gain confidence. The goal is to have a greater family awareness of what this person is trying to communicate to us. When an Alzheimer's person loses their speech, they still need to communicate. They still have a core human need to feel loved, to feel cared for, to be validated, to communicate. And the only way sometimes they can do that is through their behaviors. And sometimes their behaviors may appear to us on the outside, on the surface, as if it's agitation or anxiety, when truly it could be that they're trying to communicate pain or disappointment or frustration with a current situation that they're in, and they cannot physically tell us unless they give us these clues through their behavior. We want to see increased job satisfaction. We want the nursing assistants and the nurses and the doctors and the social workers and the chaplains and the front desk registration people and the caring volunteers who are out there connecting with these people going through the journey with Alzheimer's. We want to see everyone have increased satisfaction in tangible results that you can connect, you can companion, you can communicate with these people. And these dear, dear saintly people, they will have peace at the end of their life. Isn't that really the goal? I mean, it's just a travesty to think that we would lock away and throw away our elders and let them just sit in these vegetative states without any attention, without anyone there to care for them, when there's possible opportunities to care, to connect, to help someone not go through a meaningless existence, to help someone experience peace at the end of their life's journey. And Alzheimer's is not discriminatory. It will hit someone with a PhD and rocket scientist. It will hit the high school dropout. It will hit the most loving, tender, sweetest, caring housewife. It will hit the person who did unimaginable things in their life and shows no remorse for it. So the goal here today, going through this training to learn about validation, to learn about the validation breakthrough, is to, number one, help you gain some confidence. Number two, to help you not only gain this confidence, but to help the people that are in the throes of Alzheimer's find resolution. Naomi Fehl in her book says every old person who are headed towards the end of life's journey has a deep-seated human, maybe considered a spiritual or an existential need to find resolution. We sometimes say that someone might have unfinished business that they need to take care of before they die. Well, that's finding resolution, and through validating these people, through walking with these people, through caring and connecting with these people, we can truly know without a shadow of a doubt that we have not left them alone in this journey. We may not always see the results that we'd like to see. We may not always see someone be able to communicate verbally with us, but we can at least take some encouragement that we've done the best that we can to help these people find resolution in this critical point in their life's journey. So a little bit of background. Fehl in her book talks about how the validation techniques and the validation breakthrough is based upon the needs of human development. You may have taken a psychology class or two in your day. Maybe you learned a little bit about Erik Erikson's stages of human development. Well, one of the last stages of human development is the need to, again, look back and feel like my life has been worthwhile, that my 60, 70, 80, 90 years on this earth has made a difference. And that's part of this seeking resolution. It's a return to the past in a person's Alzheimer's state. Oftentimes their older, most lengthiest memories are the ones that are held intact the longest. So they return to those memories to try to make sense of their confusing present moment. And so we need to go with them to the past. We need to, like the old 80s movie Back to the Future, we need to hop in the DeLorean time machine and push the buttons to get back to 1985, 1945, 1965, whatever year we need to return to, so that in this present moment, these people that we're working with will feel safe. They will feel respected. They will realize that they have lived a productive and meaningful existence, to know that they are loved, to help them restore order to their life, and to ultimately help them deal with this unfinished business, even if it's a below-the-surface dealing, and we may not be privy to the dealing that is going on. But if we take our part in the journey, which is to care and to connect and to companion these folks, then we can at least know that we've done our part to help this person meet these end-of-life needs. So Naomi Thale talks about 4 phases of resolution. The first phase is when someone just becomes mal-oriented. Maybe I'm not being fair. Sometimes I just call this the grumpy stage. Naomi Thale talks about a person who will sit with their arms crossed, with a furrowed brow, just with a very suspicious look on their face. A person in this stage of their Alzheimer's has a lot of suspicion. They may have some paranoia, and it can result in a very untrusting relationship. That can be very hard on a family member, to feel like their loved one doesn't trust them, like they're trying to hide something from them, like they're out to get them. And then eventually that can lead further into their Alzheimer's journey to become very time confused. And not just like forgetting if it's 2 in the afternoon or 9 o'clock in the morning. That's part of it. That can even show up earlier in the malorientation stage. But time confusion refers to just time holds no meaning. Very often a person with Alzheimer's gets their mornings and evenings completely turned around. Maybe they want to have breakfast at 7 o'clock at night. Maybe they want to have dinner at 9 in the morning. In our oriented world, we don't deal with that very well. We like our order and structure. No, you must have bacon and eggs at 9 a.m. for breakfast. You can't have, baked chicken at this point in time. So time just is irrelevant at this point. That's where especially they begin to go back into their past because they can't make sense of the present, so they return to the past to try to find a sense of peace and normalcy. And like Gladys Wilson in that video, a person in repetitive motion is a person who's constantly tapping or folding or playing. So here again is some of the things with maloriented person. They play the blame game. They oftentimes use objects to express their feelings. So we'll go through some of these validation techniques with the maloriented person. And then we'll look at some of these others. I kind of jumped the gun here. So with a maloriented person, we have to center ourselves before we even get in front of this person. And basically that just acknowledges that maybe this person has hurt you. Maybe the last time you tried to engage this person, they said some pretty mean and nasty things to you. You just need to acknowledge that you feel what you feel, that maybe you felt angry, maybe you felt frustrated. And then you just need to place your agenda to the side and have a moment, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through just a scream into a pillow, whatever it takes to just get that out so that you can concentrate on being with that person in the moment. We want to always start with the non-threatening facts. So if a person has been on the blaming side and, well, she took my watch, instead of saying, well, no, they didn't, I know they didn't, you would say to them, well, who took your watch? When did they take your watch? Where did you last have your watch? Not why. Why do you think they took your watch? You don't want to ask them why. You just want to focus on the facts, just the facts. You want to put on your Joe Friday hat and just get to the facts. Because someone in maloriented in any of these stages, they've lost the ability to do self-understanding. So another great idea is just to explore the past. You can read more in Thale's book about these approaches, but if someone is very upset and blaming you about stealing their watch or someone stole their watch, you can ask them, well, who gave you that watch? And when did you get that watch? And boy, oh, I bet that watch reminds you of all the wonderful memories you had with your family. And you'll just see a change in facial expression. You'll see someone open up to you because you've gone back to that past where they're able to connect in a much better way. With a time-confused person, as I mentioned, they've lost track of the chronological time, whether it's 9 a.m., 9 p.m., it doesn't mean anything to them. These are the folks that find a lot of comfort in baby dolls and teddy bears. You'll see them carrying around baby dolls, stuffed animals, because it goes back to a happy time. Maybe it reminds them of being a new mom, especially for the ladies, especially some of the gentlemen. They love to get their hands on something physical, like a hammer or a set of tools, if that was something that they really enjoyed doing. And these folks, they can't follow the typical rules. And so you want to go with them, and you want to be very extra patient and extra slow and low with them. You always want to approach slow and low. Low tone of voice, slow in your requests with them, because it's very hard for them to follow a train of thought. So again, we start with the time-confused people by centering ourselves. We want to rephrase what they're saying to us. We may hear a key word, and we want to use that in our communication with them. Oftentimes, a time-confused person is very comforted by holding their hand. If it seems like they're accepting of a gentle touch on their elbow or their shoulder or on their back, that might be very comforting. But we also want to look for any signs that touch is not comforting, and stop if we at all see that someone pulls away or is not enjoying that. These time-confused people love music. I held a weekly hymn sing-along at a memory care unit for years, and I can't remember all the verses to Amazing Grace, but they would correct me every week if I got verse 2 confused with verse 3, or vice versa. They'd correct me all the time, because they love music. They love music in their church or their faith traditions. They love music from their childhood. Maybe the old-fashioned patriotic songs from our older generation could really strike a chord, pun intended, with our folks. So next we'll look at repetitive movers. Naomi Fale says that they heal by releasing their emotions. Their physical movement, it's like tapping to the beat, releases some emotion. It communicates. A wonderful volunteer that worked with me for a couple of years and took chaplaincy training with me met a man that we called Cowboy. Big, towering, over 6 feet tall gentleman. Loved his boots and loved his cowboy hat. He wouldn't tell you about his life, but he would show you his life. He would sit at the dining room in his nursing home, and he would just tap the table. He'd have this ongoing drum beat in his head, and that's how he would just communicate. So Nancy would pull up a chair next to him, and she'd make eye contact with him, and she'd just let this gentleman know that she was there to be with him, that she was there to spend some time with him, and that she was looking forward to their time together. And then she would just mirror whatever this gentleman was doing. If he was tapping, she would tap. If he was rubbing the table, she would rub the table. And before long, he would make eye contact with her. He would smile. He'd attempt to communicate with her, because his movement talks. His movement is what was communicating to the outside world. And if he was having a bad day, it was written all over his face, because there was no controlling, no holding back what the emotional floodgates might bring about. And it was very hard, because if you were working with this gentleman, you never knew what you were going to get. And so that's, again, where, coming back to all of these, we'd have to center ourselves. We have to accept the fact that my agenda cannot be the primary focus of this time with this person. I have to accept that this person may break every social faux pas in the book, and that's okay. I have to be okay with that if I want to connect, if I want to companion with this person. So centering, realizing that the noise of a repetitive mover can really get on your nerves. And ambiguity. A person, if they still have their speech in the repetitive motion, they mix up their nouns and their verbs, and they combine words together. And so you have to learn to respond with ambiguity and say, oh, that looks great. We don't know what that is necessarily. We don't exactly know what they mean by all that. But what we're doing is just validating that if they seem happy, we want to validate that experience. It says, oh, that seems like you're having a wonderful day today. It seems like you're having a wonderful day today. If they seem down, if their movement seems very like rushed and frustrated and filled with anger and tense, you could say to a person, oh, it seems like you're really having a problem today, or that seems to be a problem. And my friend Nancy, our volunteer Nancy, did such a great job of mirroring the person's movement, linking her movement with the person's movement in order to make a connection. And again, music with these people is a wonderful treat as well. Unfortunately, we have to talk about the land of the lifeless living. We realize that there comes a point in time when too many of our people just fall into this vegetative state where they lose all speech, they lose all connection to the outside world. They may have minimal moments where they're still able to connect or still able to say a word or two, but the time for them of connecting is long gone, unfortunately. So for us, with someone who really is in this lifeless living point in time, the goal is to tune in to them in the moment, to really have all of our physical, emotional, spiritual eyes and ears focused on this person in that moment. And then we need to tune out the noise, tune out the distraction, tune out the voices in our head that say, oh, there's no way you're going to make a difference. They can't hear you. They're not going to respond to you. It's not worth your time to spend time with this person. There's so many other people who would much more benefit from your time with them. I know I've heard those phrases, and if you've spent any amount of time trying to connect with folks who are in a very difficult place, maybe you've heard the same voices inside of your head. And it doesn't mean we're going crazy. It just means we're human, that it's a real struggle. It's part of that feeling overwhelmed and uncertain. And so I just want to validate that with you, that you are normal. You are in the ball game with all the rest of us having these same thoughts and feelings. So tune in, tune out the noise. This is where you saw Naomi Fail touching the side of Gladys Wilson's cheeks. For me and my comfort level, I usually don't go there, touching someone's cheeks. But I've had certain people that will literally physically grab me and draw me into their little bubble. And it may not be my comfort zone, but they draw me into their little world. And it seems like even that level of closeness helps them to connect, because again, they've lost the social faux pas of you don't get too close to someone. They don't have any personal space anymore. And so sometimes we can just join them if we can be comfortable with that. It can make a huge, huge difference. Again, music is just an amazing opportunity to reconnect with these people. And we don't expect a lot of responses from someone in a vegetative state. It might be weeks or months in between times when you get a response from someone. But every once in a while, they're still there. They are in there. They are alive inside their body. And we have to remember that. We don't count them out yet. And we just trust that our presence, that your presence, the time, the commitment it takes to be with someone in this stage and phase of life, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of emotional and spiritual maturity. It takes a lot of self-realization. You just can't run in and run out. If you want to make a difference with these people, you have to stay the course, stay with this person to help this person realize that they can feel safe, that they are loved, and that their life can be touched if you take the time and the effort to reach out to touch their life through your presence, through your quietness, through your silence with them. It can all make a difference. So I'm just going to try to pause here for a moment. I've done a lot of talking, and we'll see if anybody is still with us here. But in the chat box here, if you have a question or if you have a comment and you want to type something in that you want me to address, please feel free to. Or if you're a person that is watching this later and what I've shared up to this point about connecting with any of these people has made a difference or brought any insight to you, then let me know, because I can go over that with you in a separate call, and in a future webinar. We can touch on this at another time. So if any of you that are listening live have a question or a comment and you want to type it in the chat box, then please do so, and I'll share that at this point. In the chat box earlier, Richard says, I have found that validation of where the Alzheimer's patient resides in time is just as important as validating the totality of their life. That is such a good point, Richard. Thank you for bringing that up. I actually got in real trouble with a patient one time I went to visit. My approach is oftentimes going far back in their past. So I will ask them about their childhood, see how verbal they are with me, see if they're able to respond to childhood questions. Then I'll move into early adolescent questions, and then I might even talk about high school, like, do you remember going to the movies in high school? What was the first movie that you went and saw? Or if I know something about their city or their town that they grew up in, I might try to make a reference to that. Or if I, so I found a lady or met with a lady who was in advanced time confusion. She thought she was residing still in 1945 when she was just a young teenager. So all my questions and time with her talking about her childhood came through clear as day. She could tell me if she was feeling good or bad. And I couldn't always tell if that was the present moment or if that was far back in time. But so I started asking her questions. I asked her about her teenage years, and she started to share with me and open up with me to a lot of pain and a lot of heartache about having her parents go through a divorce. And then I jumped from teenage years to raising a family. So I made about a 10-year leap. And the horror in her eyes, when I asked her about her children, you would have thought that I had, accused a Bronco fan of rooting for the Raiders. She looked at me with terror, said, "Oh, heavens, I am not married yet, so I don't have any children. You must be mistaken." And I quickly turned on a dime and apologized and said, "I'm so sorry. I just thought that, we had gone over this before. I didn't realize that, you were still so young. Please forgive me. I'm mistaken here." So, so I learned my lesson not to take even a 10-year leap and assume that the person will still be with me in their time confusion. So we've had a chance to validate a lot of people that could remember those days and those times of what it was like to care for an infant. I had another lady who was 95. She had been on hospice care for many months, was not getting better, and at times as she would slowly progress further in her Alzheimer's, we were just at a loss at what we could do to help her. And finally, somebody gave her a baby doll. And you would have thought that that baby doll was like the miracle drug of all miracle drugs. That baby doll got thousands and thousands of kisses a day. That baby doll was wrapped up tight as tight could be, swaddled. That baby was sung to, loved to, talked to the point where this poor lady would even try to feed her baby doll instead of eat the food herself. So she began to lose more weight. And so the staff there had to try to talk to her about how the baby doll would need a nap in order for her to have time to, eat herself, and then she could feed the baby doll later. So eventually the woman progressed in her physical ability. Her mental alertness was sharper. She still wasn't clearly oriented to the present time, but she was sharper. Her smile was brighter. Her physical abilities were stronger. And we ended up graduating her off of hospice, all due to a baby doll. So it's amazing what happens when you take the time to discern what place a person is in their disease process, which stage of the Alzheimer's process they're in, and what might be the best way to validate them. So again, this is just a very, very brief 30,000-foot overview. But again, the goal is that I hope it builds confidence for you. I hope it builds the confidence to try these things out. If you get a little frustrated before you go to try to connect and care for a person in this situation with advanced memory loss, think about what you need to do before stepping into the room. Is it a number of deep breaths? Is it a reminder that I need to set my agenda to the side? Is it a brief prayer? Is it listening to a certain song on the radio or on your phone or iPod before you walk in? Whatever that might be, whatever steps you need to take for yourself, I would strongly encourage you to do that. It will seriously boost your confidence. So again, the goal is to begin with care. You would not be listening to this webinar or watching the replay if you didn't care. That's obvious. But our caring spirit lasts only so long if we don't care for ourselves, if we don't care for our own caring spirit. So in the validation breakthrough, I thought that was so wise how Naomi Fail began every stage of the validation techniques with centering, with getting focused on what do I need to do to make sure I am serving and caring from a full and overflowing heart as best as I can. So that's the care point. Connecting. Connecting is making that connection in the moment, whether you're connecting over the events of Pearl Harbor, whether you're connecting over the joy in a person's expression as they kiss their baby doll, whether you're connecting through music or art or the repetitive drumming like we did with Cowboy, whatever technique you use to lead to that connection, realize that you may only have a little 5-minute window for that connection, but that 5-minute window has lasting effects. And it's important to encourage others. So if you find a technique that works, it's so helpful to encourage the others in your family. Hey, I realized after all these months of trying different things to connect more with Mom, that remember how she used to sing us this one specific song when we would go to bed? I sang that with her, and she broke out in song and wouldn't stop singing for 20 minutes. So you'll never know what specific technique might be that key to unlock the person's memory and unlock and fill this person's heart with joy until you continue to try to connect. You got to keep trying and keep trying. I've learned the hard way. There are certain stories I don't care to share on this webinar, but trust me, if there's been a mistake to be made, I've made it. And I'm sure anyone who has cared for someone with Alzheimer's will tell you that they've outdone themselves with mistakes over the time. But to really companion, to really have a relationship with a person who is in the throes of Alzheimer's, it takes the mentality of one step at a time. Take a deep breath. Remember to keep working on filling your own heart so that you can pour out of your heart into this person's life. Building up your repertoire, building up your toolbox of techniques, whether that's through the validation breakthrough, whether that's through training through Teepa Snow's work and positive caregiving approaches. I would highly recommend her approaches as well. Between Teepa Snow and Naomi Fail, just in my humble opinion as a semi-educated person who's been doing this for a while, both of those ladies have a real niche for what they're trying to help us learn about how to connect and companion folks who are going through Alzheimer's. So I've listed a number of resources, and this is just, again, beginning to scratch the surface. I found a lot of resources, a lot of insights through the National Alzheimer's Association, if you're a family member or you have a close friend who is a family member and struggling with this journey through Alzheimer's, go with that friend, go with that family member to a local support group and get help to realize that you're not alone. Isolation and feeling all alone in this journey can really ransack a caregiver and burn a caregiver out like there's no tomorrow. Teepa Snow and the Positive Approach to Care, she's got a wonderful list of YouTube videos and training videos, and I'll be sending out in the course of some follow-up emails to all of you a resource list or a playlist I put on my own YouTube channel so that you can read and watch and learn from Teepa Snow in action. If you want to find out more about how music impacts the life of our folks with Alzheimer's, I would so highly encourage you to go to musicandmemory.org. There's also a documentary called Alive Inside, which documents and shows the amazing impact of music in the lives of folks with Alzheimer's. Naomi Fail's Validation Training Institute, you can see that. Anything, again, you can get your hands on, books or training by Naomi Fail or Teepa Snow. And one of the classics in the world of understanding Alzheimer's, that if you've got a friend that's in the very early stages of going through this with a family member, give them the book, The 36-Hour Day. It helps them understand some of these very confusing and very disheartening things that begin to change in the lives of their loved ones. And if you haven't watched the movie Still Alice that came out a couple years ago, I think Alec Baldwin is the co-star. I can't think of the actress's name, who is the main actress, and she was also up for some significant awards a couple years ago for her portrayal of a Ivy League professor who succumbed to early onset Alzheimer's, and the struggles that her family had, and just some of the own interpersonal struggles that this woman named Alice had. So I'd highly recommend those. Those are wonderful, wonderful resources. So again, I'm going to pause out of this, and I'm going to see if there's any other comments, thoughts. Yes, a great point. Richard, again, going back to younger and younger songs, something like Jesus Loves Me, or Naomi Fail used a spiritual song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. It's amazing. I work with some music therapists now who have a lot of success with using some Johnny Cash songs for whatever reason. You can also go back to some familiar songs in the 40s and 50s with folks. I can't think of any titles off the top of my head right now, but it's amazing the impact that going back to younger and younger days has, and it unlocks the memories of all these folks. So good to see you on board here, Ken. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm going to end this recording now, but any of you that are still on live, if you want to hold on, I'll take you off of mute, and if you want to chat a bit, we can do that. But for anyone who's seeing this later on, who watches the replay of this, my goal today, I hope today you realize that you can gain confidence to care, to connect, and to companion with a person who's going through Alzheimer's disease by taking some very simple steps through this validation breakthrough process. It begins with centering yourself. It begins to pouring into your own heart, so that out of the fullness of your own heart, you will be able to pour into the lives of others. So again, the goal is that you'll be able to confidently companion these people who we love so dearly going through this. So thank you again for joining me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And I hope and pray that this time today really helps you to advance hope as we care and connect for those going through Alzheimer's.